The National Desk, America's News Now.
Back on track, the country's fragile supply chain spared as railroad unions reach a deal. What's included in this last-minute agreement? Stubbornly high inflation. The latest economic data shows price increases not slowing fast enough, hitting Wall Street and your wallet.
Food, fuel, and housing. That's the sweet spot of the American consumer, and that's how they understand this.
How the new numbers could affect the Federal Reserve's fight against inflation. And nationwide abortion ban proposal. Senator Lindsey Graham pushing to restrict the procedure in nearly most cases coast to coast.
Post-Dobbs, America's got to make some decisions.
The controversial issue becoming a critical factor this campaign season. Plus, new portions of the Mar-a-Lago affidavit unsealed. What we're learning about an earlier FBI visit to former President Donald Trump's Florida home. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Eugene Ramirez. On this weekend edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week and a look ahead at what to expect. We start with the four big stories we've been following for you all week. Less than 24 hours before railroad workers were set to strike, a tentative agreement reached and a railroad strike averted. A new inflation report showing prices still at record highs, taking a toll on American wallets. All eyes now on the midterm elections. After the final primaries were held this week, for many voters, abortion could be a deciding factor come November. And a judge unsealing more of the FBI affidavit used in the search of former President Trump's Florida home. First, more on that supply chain crisis now averted after large freight rail companies and unions representing 60,000 workers reached a tentative agreement. President Biden announcing that preliminary deal Thursday, less than 24 hours from the early Friday morning deadline when workers would have walked off the job to strike. The White House says rail workers will get a 24% pay increase over 5 years that is retroactive to 2020 and will also benefit from better sick leave policies. Railroad companies will be able to retain and recruit more workers. But the railroad industry is not out of the woods just yet. Leaders of the 12 unions involved in these negotiations must now sell the agreement to members who will vote to ratify or reject that deal over the next several weeks. Now, this railroad strike would have caused supply chain disruptions at a time when inflation is already taking a toll on Americans' budgets. The National Desk, Satra El-Nashar, takes a closer look at the numbers.
The highly anticipated August inflation report delivering an unwanted reality check. Getting prices under control won't be easy. While gas and plane ticket prices fell substantially, the relief is overshadowed by soaring costs of medical care, food, and shelter. Earlier this summer, Michael Moore of Lake Worth Beach, Florida, saw his apartment rent go from $1,000 per month to $1,500, a 50% increase.
If I can't make rent, I'd be homeless. They'd kick me, put me on the streets. From what they said, it was their way or the highway.
Some finding ways to be flexible in their grocery shopping, like buying wholesale or private labels. According to Bankrate economist Mark Hamrick, the inflationary pressures driving up food prices are long-term problems.
When we think about all the disruptions that we've had with the climate, and that does affect food supply. Also, those who produce food also have to pay for labor.
The labor shortage has employers paying a premium for workers, but Tuesday's inflation data show that rising prices are outpacing wages, meaning the buying power of the average hourly worker is down almost 3% from a year ago. The president hosting a celebration of Democrats' recently passed Inflation Reduction Act intended to lower energy costs and prescription drug prices. Republicans calling the event Tuesday an out-of-touch victory lap.
With this law, the American people won and special interests lost.
Maya McGinnis, head of the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, supports the law, but in a new op-ed says overall the president hasn't been fiscally responsible since taking office and argues the debts racked up by Presidents Biden and Trump make the country vulnerable to higher inflation. In Washington, I'm Satra El-Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
High prices are impacting every American family, and right now where it's hurting the most is at the grocery store. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins continues our coverage now with more on how these soaring prices are forcing some to make difficult decisions.
I spoke with a single mom of 2. She says that she had to sell her car because of high gas prices and now uses that money to buy food for her kids. Kiara H. lives with her 2 children in Henderson, Nevada, packing lunches. Increasingly packs a punch to her family budget.
Lunchables, they used to be like $1 and some change. Now they're almost $3.
With no relief in sight, something big had to give.
I sold my car and I had to budget off, add that to the grocery budget.
American households now spending on average $460 more per month for the same basket of goods and services compared with a year ago. The latest numbers show overall groceries are up 13.5% year over year, the highest rise since 1979. But economists say it can feel even worse.
It turns out that a lot of the stuff that we buy on a regular basis has been some of the stuff that's been going up fastest in price. You know, things like eggs, for example. It's just crazy to think about how much a dozen eggs have gone up.
Egg prices up nearly 40%.
Bread is, oh my goodness, bread is almost $4. Milk is $6, $7, $8.
Kiara remains hopeful relief will eventually come.
I hope so, because I don't think we can go on like this.
Economists explaining that while prices will likely come down a little at some point, it's almost certain they will never return to what they were before. I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting.
Well, lawmakers and candidates now waiting to see how inflation will impact the midterm elections, especially after a new consumer price index report out this week shows high prices holding steady. Democrats are keeping the focus on legislation they say will help, while Republicans are launching attacks on the president.
The Inflation Reduction Act is going to reduce prescription drug prices, health care prices, energy prices. There's a $300 billion down payment on reducing the deficit this year.
President Biden and House Democrats' reckless spending and failed far-left policies have plunged our economy into a recession.
Well, the inflation rate right now at 8.3% is worse in some crucial voting areas. Take a look. Phoenix, where residents there are experiencing a 13% increase. Atlanta, 11.7%. Miami is at 10.7%. Now a look over the U.S. Capitol. We are now less than 2 months out from those midterm elections. The final primary elections held this week in Delaware, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. For many voters, abortion could be a deciding factor come November. That became more apparent this week as Republican lawmakers proposed a national ban on abortion. The National Desk Chief Political Correspondent Scott Thuman has this story.
What intensified in the fight over women's rights here is expected to be a driving force here. Access to abortions an even higher priority in politics, especially as lawmakers try to cement new policies.
We have the ability in Washington to speak on this issue if we choose. I have chosen to speak.
Republican Lindsey Graham Tuesday proposing Congress ban most abortions nationwide after 15 weeks of pregnancy.
Abortion is a contentious issue. Post-Dobbs, America's got to make some decisions.
Polling last month shows while 32% feel there should be no restrictions, the majority want at least some limits or with exceptions, like when the mother's health is at risk, or they want to outlaw abortion completely. But Democrats say there's been an obvious shift toward granting more access and that other polls show overall support for legalized abortion has grown now to 60%. And they're banking on that getting them elected, airing attack ads against abortion opponents.
Not even in cases of rape
or incest.
And women will die because of it.
All because of Greg Abbott's abortion law.
Vice President Harris this week calling for the issue to be more front of mind this election cycle.
We must be vigilant and we must stand shoulder to shoulder. And this moment, post-Dobbs, highlights the fact that we still have a lot of work to do.
They worry should they lose midterms, they'd lose this battle. Even before the Supreme Court's decision giving states the ability to outlaw abortion, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said a nationwide ban from Congress is possible. In Washington, Scott Thuman for the National Desk.
And we could soon learn more about the story that added fuel to this abortion controversy, the Supreme Court draft opinion leak. According to CNN, Justice Elena Kagan says she expects the justices will have more information by the end of this month. Investigators have tried to pinpoint who leaked that draft opinion when it was published back in May. Well, Justice Kagan reportedly saying if investigators have not figured out who leaked it, then the next question is how the Supreme Court will prevent the same thing from happening again. This week, a federal judge unsealing more of the FBI affidavit used in the search of former President Donald Trump's Florida home. The new details show there was a grand jury subpoena in June looking for video of the Mar-a-Lago storage room. FBI agents reportedly saw up to 55 boxes of records there, and the Trump Organization turned over a hard drive in response to that subpoena. Now, according to the DOJ, there's no need to keep the information sealed since Trump's attorneys already revealed parts of the grand jury's investigation. Last month, FBI agents retrieved hundreds of secret, top secret, and highly classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. The judge paused the DOJ's review of the documents to appoint a special master to filter out potentially privileged information first. Well, now we know who will fill that role. Thursday, the judge appointing longtime New York Judge Raymond Dreary as the independent arbiter. This comes after both the DOJ and Trump's lawyers made clear they would be satisfied with his appointment. The Justice Department and the House Oversight Committee are investigating whether former President Trump had more presidential records that he has not yet turned over. The head of the Oversight Committee recently sent a letter to the National Archives asking for an assessment on any presidential records still unaccounted for. That letter pointing out concerns raised by Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, that the former president might have transferred classified documents to other locations, like his National Bedminster Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey. One other problem could be looming for the former president. Over the past week, the Justice Department issuing dozens of subpoenas in the January 6 investigation. These subpoenas are seeking information about the actions of the former president and his associates related to the attack on the U.S. Capitol. The DOJ has already seized the phones of 2 Trump aides as evidence, and the January 6 committee's next hearing could take place as early as September 28th. 3 major credit card companies say they intend to separately categorize gun purchases, some seeing this as an invasion of privacy, despite credit cards already categorizing different types of transactions. I'm back with our fact-check team now, Janae and Connor. Connor, you're a lawyer, so break this down for us. Where's this alleged invasion of privacy here?
Well, there's 4 different ways that someone can invade your privacy, but the main one that applies to these credit card companies is called public disclosure of private fact. And that happens when someone discloses a private matter that's highly offensive and is not a legitimate concern the public needs to know about.
So let's apply this to this current situation with credit cards. Would the companies be violating the privacy of people buying guns?
I understand the argument here, but the answer is likely no, because there's no guarantee, at least not yet, that they will disclose this to anyone. Plus, they already have codes for several other categories like car rentals and clothing stores. Since this is such a common practice, it would be tough to argue that a disclosure of a gun purchase would be some sort of exception here.
Sure, you mentioned the word disclosure. Janae, I'll ask you this. What kind of information can credit card companies disclose and share?
Right, so we found that credit card companies share non-public personal information with companies they are affiliated with. Things like social security numbers, bank information, and other personal financial information, just to name a few.
But of course, some exceptions exist to protect consumer privacy as well.
Exactly. So federal law requires credit card issuers to provide privacy notices and allow consumers to opt out or say no to information sharing under certain circumstances. But it's up to each financial institution to decide how customers can opt out and how long it could take. For example, the company you use can require you to complete and return a form or to call a phone number. The bottom line is credit cards have codes for lots of purchases, and if consumers want extra protection, they have to affirmatively take steps to opt out, sharing the information.
Yeah, it's not automatic. It's a step that we need to take as consumers. Good information there. Thank you both. And the Fact Check team will continue to follow developments on these and other issues. You can also read this story with links to where they found their information on our website, thenationaldesk.com. Still to come, crime surge taking a toll, a frustrating rash of break-ins hurting businesses, how owners are now responding to this crisis. And mixed economic news. While construction is in demand to build factories for new jobs, there just aren't enough laborers to do the work. The National Desk team of reporters bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. For more young adults considering buying homes in Texas, to a worker shortage for Ohio construction projects. We're taking the pulse of America. We start in Oregon with how businesses are dealing with a rise in crime.
We drove through the downtown locations hit hard during 2020. That includes the Justice Center, Pioneer Courthouse Square, and the busiest parts of the Pearl District. You can see things have changed over the last 2 years. Jim Bryce owns the Fields Bar and Grill. After several break-ins, he opened his latest business in Vancouver instead of Portland.
You take a look at all these buildings around us, all of them have been hit multiple times. And it gets frustrating.
Kurt Huffman says his business in Southeast and North Portland are thriving in a way downtown locations are not.
Those spaces and those neighborhoods have really come back. Where we continue to have real issues is in the downtown core.
Huffman says over the summer, things got a lot cleaner in Portland. But before that, he expanded outside the city.
Those communities are booming and they're clean.
Some business owners are more concerned with the cleanliness and crime.
The challenge is that our elected officials have allowed this to happen. That's the reality.
Very stressful. It always is.
That's how Seth Ali describes purchasing his first home. Over the years, younger adults have backed off the idea because of the rising costs.
I was definitely hesitant.
Ali grew frustrated with paying an absurd amount of rent to an apartment, so he found he could put that same amount of money into a mortgage. He just closed on his first house today.
It was an easy decision to make at that point.
During the early years of the pandemic, it was harder for first-time home buyers to break into the Austin market. But now the competition is starting to calm down.
There's more inventory, more homes to choose from. So what this means for a buyer is that they face less competition as they're shopping for a house.
Younger adults still face not making enough money, large amounts of student loan debt, and not having the credit needed.
It can hinder the potential buyer's ability to save. They're going to be spending a higher proportion of their income on repaying that debt.
Right now, I don't think there's enough labor locally here in Columbus and Central Ohio.
Not enough workers, but more than enough work. That's what Central Ohio is facing.
1, 2,
with the Intel fabs coming, and with any number of projects underway, like this $2 billion OSU hospital, new hotels, and Google and Amazon projects on the way. Dorsey Hager leads an umbrella group of unions for steelworkers, pipe fitters, electricians, and more. He says unions can pull from other parts of the country to make up the gap, but they're really focused on getting young people here at home to take up the trades. Hager says the trade jobs are different now, with salaries up to 6 figures and better working conditions.
Is there some manual labor that we still do and perform that's dirty and hot and cold? Yes, but by and by, a lot of the work that we do is a lot cleaner. It's a lot safer. It's a lot, not as physical on our bodies.
Labor strikes happening across America as more and more workers look to unionize. Coming up, I'm speaking with a labor expert about what's happening in the workforce and why. This week, nearly 1,300 employees at the New York Times were supposed to return to office, but they simply refused. The workers issued a letter saying they will continue to produce high-quality work remotely. Well, the union argues any return to office policy should be part of a negotiated contract, and if managers try to force them into the office, they will go on strike. Labor strikes are interrupting everything right now, from medical procedures to the start of the school year, and even the supply chain was threatened. So what does this tell us about the state of the American workforce? Labor expert Robert Bruno joins me now to explain.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think the state of the workforce is deeply agitated. I think they came out of COVID with some serious grievances that had to do with the conditions in which they worked, and they're coming off of 4 decades of what were really flat wages and an erosion of lots of hard-earned benefits. Job quality has really degraded in the United States. And I think that workers now are looking to labor unions and to collective efforts as a way to upgrade, to improve those working conditions. So, I think it speaks really to deep grievances.
Do you feel like the unions are being more aggressive now?
So, the word that we use in our field of study really is a level of assertiveness. I think they feel that the infrastructure, that the environment is more conducive to pushing back a little bit harder on their demands. Popular, opinion about unions is at a near all-time high. So the terrain is more favorable to act in a more assertive way. And that's very typical in collective bargaining relationships.
Sure. Now, workload has become a big concern for many American workers. Some sectors experiencing staffing shortages, leading to new efforts to unionize. As you mentioned, the union's more open to working with the workers and being more assertive, as you said. Starbucks is an example where many store workers are now organizing. What can the companies do to show that they can directly address the concerns if they don't want their employees to unionize?
So employers have been doing things that have produced the conditions that have led to this level of worker assertiveness. And so it does go back to, how are you treating your workers? Most importantly, I think, are you giving workers a voice? Do they feel like they've got a say in the decisions that are impacting their working lives? Lack of respect or lack of voice very often really does fuel and underscore the disputes that then arise around pay and benefits. So I think the number one thing employers can do is to actually work with their employees, listen to their employees, treat them with a great deal of respect, allow their voice to contribute to the company's efficiency, productivity. If they're genuinely concerned about not having to face, walkouts, strikes, boycotts.
And you can watch more of that interview and look for updates on the ongoing strikes happening across the country right now on our website, thenationaldesk.com. This week, the World Health Organization announcing the end of the pandemic is in sight. The Director General cautioning there's still a risk of more variants, deaths, disruption, and uncertainty, but says the world is in its best position to date. Johns Hopkins University reporting about 12,000 COVID deaths over the past week. Now, aside from a few weeks this past May and June, the only other time weekly deaths were this low was during March 2020, the very first month of the pandemic. The FDA now warning monkeypox could mutate if an antiviral drug is overused. Federal health officials say the virus is only one mutation away from evolving and becoming resistant to the treatment, TPOXX. The agency recently issued new guidance telling doctors to be judicious in how they prescribe that medication to treat at-risk patients. The CDC also saying the rate of new monkeypox cases is slowing in parts of the country. A final farewell to a queen. The funeral for Britain's longest reigning monarch is Monday. Coming up, what we know about Queen Elizabeth's final resting place. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website now. A New York City mother is facing charges in the drowning deaths of her 3 children in Coney Island. In Florida, a video now going viral after a Chick-fil-A worker tackles a man trying to carjack a woman outside the restaurant. And in Maine, a charter boat in for quite the surprise when a 7-foot mako shark jumps on deck. Those stories and much more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. And taking a look ahead to stories making headlines this week. Queen Elizabeth's funeral will be held Monday. The late monarch will be buried next to her husband Philip at Windsor Castle just outside of London. Also Monday, an Indiana judge will hear arguments over the state's abortion ban 4 days after it took effect. The ban makes it a felony to provide abortion services with few exceptions. And on Wednesday, the Federal Reserve meets to discuss what is likely to be another aggressive interest rate hike. The August Consumer Price Index report showed inflation remains stubbornly high. Another troubling sign for working Americans getting pinched by inflation. Still to come, a new survey breaking down the painful reality of growing wages. And mixed messaging for migrants. A former acting commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, Mark Morgan, takes a look at the latest proposals from the Biden administration and Democratic mayors over the border crisis. You're watching The National Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can watch us live weekdays, 6 a.m. till 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Time. And, of course, anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We're back after this.
The National Desk, America's News Now.
This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Eugene Ramirez. Right now, federal officials are struggling to get red-hot inflation under control as these higher prices take a toll on Americans' budgets. The average household is already spending an average of $460 more per month for the same basket of goods and services compared to just a year ago. Now, right now, energy prices are falling, but are still 25% higher than a year ago. And we're also seeing higher electric bills, 15% higher than this time last year. New car prices and transportation services, things like airline tickets, running double digits higher. Now, the rising costs are outpacing wages, continuing to put a pinch on American workers. The National Desk's Angelo Brown reports.
Millions of Americans are earning more money but are still broke.
The larger context here, every single American has lost money based on the rapid increase in price costs because our wages have not grown as fast.
Wages are up, but so is everything else. This new survey from Bankrate puts it all in perspective. Bankrate found 61% of workers have gotten a raise, better paying job, or both over the last year. Usually, more money means more security, but not when inflation is at record highs. 55% said their pay is not keeping up with the increase in household expenses due to inflation, and many got a raise.
Despite a very strong labor market where 60% of workers are getting pay raises of one form or another, we found that inflation is outpacing that for a lot of households. Even those among those that did get a pay raise half said it wasn't enough to keep up with the increase in household expenses.
Especially at the grocery store. Eggs, not a luxury item, up over 39%. Flour, over 23%. Milk, over 17%. Author Michelle Singletary describes what many of us are doing.
I'll look at my bank statement, figure out what's going on, jot it down, and then sort of go through and see what I can cut.
Record inflation hurts low to middle income families the most. The Economic Policy Institute says people making $7.25 an hour, that's the federal minimum wage, are earning less now than over 60 years ago if you factor in inflation.
I mean, we've seen a strong labor market. We've seen some of the best wage growth in 20 years. We had, up until recently, the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. We'd normally be doing backflips about this type of environment, but with inflation running at 4-decade highs, it's swamped those pay increases.
The director of the Regional Economic Development Institute at Colorado State University says if there's any reason for optimism, it's that prices aren't going up that much month to month. But when you back out and look at it year to year, inflation is at 8.3%. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
The average interest rate on a 30-year mortgage hit 6% for the first time since 2008, double what it was a year ago. The Mortgage Bankers Association reports home loan applications have fallen nearly 30% this year. Experts say it's because loan demand has nowhere to go but down as the interest rates go up. And we turn now to the fentanyl crisis. Authorities now warning the drug has become a weapon of mass destruction. In the past year, there have been more than 107,000 overdose deaths. Fentanyl is responsible for nearly 70% of deadly overdoses and is the leading cause of death for people ages 18 to 45. Now, adults are not the only ones in danger here. Authorities in Florida warning parents after a student found fentanyl at school. The drug was inside a baggie near the lockers at Atlantic High School in Port Orange, Florida. The Drug Enforcement Administration says cartels are now increasingly targeting children. The DEA warning fentanyl pills or powder are being sold in rainbow colors and resemble sidewalk chalk. In July, fentanyl seizures jumped nearly 200% at the southern border, but it's unclear how many drugs are getting through. The National Desk's Jan Jeffcoat went one-on-one with former Acting Director of Customs and Border Protection Mark Morgan this week. They discussed the latest border headlines.
First, let's take a listen to the exchange between VP Kamala Harris and Chuck Todd with NBC's Meet the Press this past weekend. Take a listen.
The border is secure, but we also have a broken immigration system, in particular over the last 4 years before we came in, and it needs to be fixed.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border is secure?
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration.
What's your thoughts, Mark?
Jan, I tell you, it's absolutely a lie. Apologize for that. It's absolutely a lie. And this is what's so frustrating. Look, we've heard this from Secretary Mayorkas as well, is that, I'll give you an example in Del Rio. Remember when we had 30,000 Haitians cross the border, 1 sector out of 9, and he stood there and told the American people that borders are closed. During a congressional testimony, Secretary Mayorkas told a congressional member that we have operational control when he knows that the cartels have operational control of large areas of border. Look, I get asked frequently is that I must be frustrated to watch this administration dismantle every effective tool, authority, and policy we have to intentionally unsecure the border, that they took the most secure border in our lifetime and they unsecured it. But absolutely I'm frustrated. But equally as an American, I'm frustrated is that we have this administration now, including the Vice President of the United States, lying to the American people.
Mark, the Vice President also added that she and the President are still seeking Congress to, quote, put into place the law and a plan for a pathway for citizenship for the millions of people who are here and are prepared to do what is legally required to gain citizenship. Mark, you've been in 2 separate administrations, both with Obama and Trump. You've helped to create policy. Isn't there already a policy in place for immigrants to become U.S. citizens?
Yeah, Jan, look, yes, this is the question. And it starts with, how about this, shocker? It starts with not illegally entering our country. That's what we're talking about. illegal immigration. It starts with going to a lawful port of entry and lawfully making a claim or lawfully entering. What this is about is giving a free pass to those that have entered illegally, and many have gone through our system, gone through the entire immigration process, and they've been ordered by a court that your claim is not valid, and they've been ordered removed but remain here illegally. This administration is talking about finding a pathway to citizenship to those individuals who have illegally entered, gone through the process, their claims have been found to be invalid and removed. And then they feign why they have no idea why in the first 19 months they've had 5.2 million illegal aliens try to break in our southwest border. Look, talk like this, messaging like this from this administration, Jan, acts like a beacon for the entire world that now is to come to illegally enter the United States, and that's exactly what they're doing.
And Mark, moving farther north to Chicago, Mayor Lori Lightfoot now catching some heat after more than 64 migrants that came to Chicago from Texas were then taken outside of her jurisdiction to a suburb 20 miles outside of Chicago, where the migrants, according to reports, were secretly dropped off at a motel there. Now, the mayor of that town called out her hypocrisy, saying she criticized Texas for busing migrants to her city, to Chicago. The mayor of Burr Ridge says this has nothing to do with the migrants. In fact, he said he's working with them right now to get them opportunities, get the children in schools. But he said, quote, "It's about the very thing that Lori Lightfoot complained about and not giving us a heads up so we could be prepared, so we can tell our residents." They invite people to come to the state, and then they just willy-nilly put them in the suburbs without even giving us the courtesy of letting us know. And Mark, some of these, towns across America now see what some of these border states like Texas and Arizona deal with daily. What's your thoughts here? And tell us about some of the challenges acclimating some of these migrants and helping them, the challenges that these cities now face.
Look, Jan, the fact that we're talking about it, so are many other networks are talking about it, is why I supported Governor Abbott doing this from day one. I knew that this was going to continue to keep this in the top fold and educate and make more Americans in this country aware. Because the fact is, unfortunately, a lot of Americans, especially in the interior, they're disconnected from this because they don't feel it, they don't see it. But they're just mistaken, because we've talked about how every state is a border state, how criminal aliens are coming into every state, how drugs are coming into every state, how our national security vulnerability from our southwest border impacts, obviously, the entire country. And so for the first time, we're really seeing how interior states and the average American is seeing the impact directly of what's happened in the southwest border. So I still think that the governor is right on this. And of course, as you described eloquently, it shows the second, third layer of hypocrisy from this mayor. But at the end of the day, look, once the Biden administration's policies have allowed these illegal aliens in, now it's up to the taxpayer. The majority of them have they don't speak the language, they don't have any skills, they have no means of financial support, and they immediately become wards of the state and the federal government. And it's the taxpayers that foot the bill for this, Jan.
Mark Morgan, great talking to you this morning. Hope you have a great week.
You bet. Thanks, Jan.
By 2035, all new vehicles sold in California will have to be electric or hydrogen powered. The Fact Check team found other states may soon be requiring the same. So, Janae, what are these other states?
Right. So 17 states could follow suit, like New York, Vermont, Maine, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Washington, Oregon, Maryland, and Colorado, just to name a few.
And why these states specifically?
So I wondered this too, and I found out it's because these specific states are included in a federal emissions law that allows them to either adopt California standards or federal standards.
Yeah, California often setting standards for other states when it comes to this. There has been some pushback, though.
Absolutely. So Virginia is on that list, but their newly elected Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin is vowing not to, quote, subject Virginia drivers to California vehicle laws. Now, we've seen that Colorado and Pennsylvania probably won't adopt California standards, and Minnesota is interesting. The Minnesota Auto Dealers Association is trying to block the California standards in court.
And Connor, we looked into California earlier tonight, but there are some other states, the ones that Janae mentioned, that are they ready to take on more electric vehicles?
That's a really good question. I dug into the numbers on this, and some states are less prepared than others. So take a look at this table I made. It uses charging stations as an example and compares how many EVs each state has per station using recent numbers from the Department of Energy. You'll see California has only one charging station for every 42 EVs, but I found that there's at least 3 states that are stretched as thin or thinner than that. New Jersey's is the worst, with only one charging station for every 369 EVs. And I did this for several more states, and you can go on our website if you want to see the rest of those numbers. But the bottom line is there are several states that may move forward with an EV mandate. However, they're going to need to increase their charging infrastructure to make this a reality.
Okay, good information on this. Thank you both. The Fact Check team will continue to follow developments on these and other issues. You can also read this story with links to where they found their information on our website, thenationaldesk.com. And still to come, police staffing shortage. Departments nationwide struggling to serve their communities as vacancies mount. Officers forced to scale back their response to certain calls. Then, parents panicked by a false alarm at a school. The steps being taken to ensure that never happens again. We'll be right back. The National Desk team of reporters bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America. We start in Utah, where families are frustrated that authorities have yet to lock up a known child predator with a long rap sheet.
This is Jonathan Soberanis when Sandy police said he exposed himself to a child in a mall bathroom. And this is Soberanis after he was arrested for allegedly sexually assaulting a young boy in a rec center bathroom. And this is Jonathan Soberanis wearing a robe and allegedly peering through the windows of Stephanie Davis's home earlier this year.
To reiterate that he's in absolute danger and that letting him out is the worst thing they could do.
Stephanie says she is frustrated that years of allegations by different families hasn't put Soberanis in prison.
We hope that it sticks, that he's put away.
Soberanis has been charged multiple times since 2018 with sex crimes involving kids, including hands-on abuse in public bathrooms. But he was repeatedly released from custody and in at least one case found incompetent to stand trial and the charges against him dismissed.
I think he knows what to say. I think he knows how to play the system.
Now, federal prosecutors allege in an indictment that Soberanis distributed and transported child pornography online. The federal charge could come with a penalty of up to 20 years.
This man is creating victims everywhere he goes, and the state of Utah is not doing anything to stop it.
In New York, staffing issues have forced Syracuse police to put break-ins on the back burner. Breaking and entering incidents have gone up 48% there in Syracuse. And just last week, one business owner reported 2 attempted break-ins, but said police were slow to respond. The police chief says that's because the department has over 40 vacant positions and only prioritized calls deemed active emergencies.
Their exact words were, if I'm not shot or stabbed, it's not an emergency. This building is just like one of my children to me, you know what I mean? This is a huge project, a huge part of my life, and yeah, for me, this is an emergency.
The north and southeast districts of the city are experiencing the biggest increase in these types of crime. And in Florida, a school staffer accidentally setting off a high school's emergency alert system, sending parents into a panic. Parents of students at Wellington High School say they received an alert indicating a mass casualty incident was occurring at the school. Fire officials responded to the alert, but were called off once it was discovered to be a false alarm. Still, parents were shaken up.
I just grabbed my keys and was already in my car. I didn't know what I was gonna do, but I just knew, like, I'm I'm going. It only took me like 30 minutes to stop shaking.
The school's principal sent out an email after that incident saying measures have now been put in place to prevent a false alarm from happening again. And still to come, our team of correspondents breaking down this week in Washington, from the latest inflation data to the intensifying battle over the border. We're back after this.
Our Washington Bureau covers Capitol Hill and D.C. every day to report on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. For some perspective on what's happening in the nation's capital, I'm joined by two of our Bureau correspondents, Scott Thuman and Atra El-Nashar. Atra, the latest inflation data, not exactly great news for those looking for relief from high prices.
Yeah, and it certainly gave Wall Street a shock. To give you any indication of how much worse this was than expectations, on Tuesday when this report came out, Wall Street had its worst week since June of 2020. We saw headline inflation, meaning the cost of everything, go from 8.5% more expensive than last year to 8.3%. So yes, an improvement, but really not by much. But what's concerning here is that core inflation, which is the cost of goods excluding some volatile items like gas and food, rose. And it's been steadily declining in recent months. So to see that reverse in trend was really troubling. Now, the good news here is that retail data from August was strong. So Americans are still spending. They're spending a lot more for the same amount of goods, but they're not yet starting to slow down their retail activity, which is good when you think about the risks of a recession. Now, basically, the story and the headline here with inflation news is that all the savings people saw at the gas pump was really eaten up by the rising cost of groceries. And it's causing consumer sentiment and certainly some sentiment of the private sector. We're seeing some CEOs sound the bell. It's causing that sentiment to really sour. And that's troubling news, especially when we've got another interest rate hike coming from the Federal Reserve mid next week.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how this is all playing out politically with midterms coming up.
Sure.
Republicans hoping this is going to be a big issue, and the president and Democrats hoping they can move on from this before November. Scott, another issue, immigration. This week, Republican governors antagonizing Democratic elected officials by sending migrants who've crossed the border illegally to so-called sanctuary areas. Democrats say they're playing politics, but when it comes at a time when Democrats are worried about their own standing with Hispanic voters, right?
Yeah, they certainly are, Steve. And now keep in mind that a lot of analysis would show that Hispanic and Latino voters still favor Democrats over Republicans when it comes to a party alliance. But they're seeing a bit of a shift, shrinking, if you will, especially from the past few years. You know, if you look back at the kind of si se puede, yes, we can fervor that former President Obama was able to drum up among the Latin vote very successfully, might I add. President Biden hasn't been able to do the same. They're seeing a decline in support. And if you look back at the 2020 numbers for the presidential election, Democrats who were voting or Democrats who were receiving votes from Hispanic and Latino voters, you saw kind of this contraction there. So a couple of states to point out when you look at what you saw in Florida. They were down 28%. It was 18 points in Texas and Wisconsin. In Nevada, 16, 12 in Pennsylvania, and 10 in Arizona. And with midterms less than 2 months away, presidential election more than 2 years away, there's this big effort to try and recapture some of that excitement. It's going to be a challenge. Now, on the flip side, real fast, Steve, Republicans may be shooting themselves in the foot a little bit, too, because of what you've referenced there, people calling it a political stunt to move these undocumented immigrants around the country, using them as quote-unquote political pawns. If that is the case, some believe that could backfire and hurt Republicans, even though they're trying to make a bigger point.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch, too, and as we see Democrats here they're really not even trying to talk about the border, trying to move on to other issues. Chief Political Correspondent Scott Thuman, National Correspondent Audra Elnashar, thank you both. Eugene, back to you.
Big thank you to our Capitol Hill team. Street racing madness. The crisis exploded nationwide during the pandemic. Still to come, the top 10 states where the problem is worsening and how some cities are now fighting back. Across the country, more and more street races are taking place on our public roads each day. This epidemic of speed is not only illegal, it's also highly dangerous. In the Spotlight on America, national investigative correspondent Chris Daniels introduces us to a mother who knows those dangers all too well.
Across the country, it's become an activity on the rise. Taking over streets, blocking intersections, spinning donuts, and racing down roads and interstates. It's known as street racing and is often captured on videos that go viral. It took root during the pandemic when roads normally clogged with commuters suddenly emptied, opening the door to a surge in chaos on our streets with sometimes deadly consequences.
What did I do wrong as a mom? Was I too strict?
Ask Lily Trujillo about street racing and a December night in Los Angeles she will not forget.
I dropped her off. I saw her standing by the door. I got teary-eyed for no reason when I saw her. But little did I know that was the last time I was going to ever see her alive.
Lily's daughter, Valentina, was a passenger in a friend's car when the driver was challenged to a race.
He took off, going over 80 miles an hour, crashed against an SUV. If he didn't race, she'll be alive walking this earth with me. And that's when I said, a street racing, it's what killed her.
Today, many more communities are grappling with this potentially deadly problem. The insurance tracker known as Insurify says rates of incidents per capita have exploded in states like North Dakota, Idaho, and Wisconsin, with Wyoming being the #1 state for street racing in 2022. Virginia and Oregon also landed in the top 10. Worse yet, Spotlight on America discovered there is only a patchwork of laws across the country that criminalize this dangerous activity. According to Insurify, just in the 10 states they examined, the penalties for street racing range from just a $20 fine to a year of jail time. The city of Tacoma, Washington took matters into its own hands this year after the police department was inundated with calls and complaints, making it an epicenter of the street racing problem in America.
They just kept going and going for hours and hours.
Sarah Rumbaugh witnessed it herself after an evening stroll.
It really hit my heart that, you know, you have no control over where you're living. This is what's happening in your neighborhood.
My colleagues.
As a Tacoma City Council member,
I ask for my council colleagues' support in adopting.
She urged her colleagues to take action, and they quickly approved a city ordinance this spring to criminalize racing attendance. And what does that do?
It makes it illegal to be a spectator at one of these events.
So is there any evidence that it's done anything to deter street racing?
We don't have street racing anymore. It has worked.
A Spotlight on America examination of local laws shows only a handful of other places have banned spectating. In Utah, San Jose, California, and Fort Worth, Texas. As more laws get on the books, Lily Trujillo is focused on educating young people about the danger through speaking at schools and meeting with teenagers as part of her organization, Street Racing Kills.
You want to see your best friend dead right next to you, have that for the rest of your life.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Chris Daniels.
And that does it for this weekend edition of the National Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget you can watch live 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Time weekdays. Check your local listings for that. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines anytime at thenationaldesk.com. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Eugene Ramirez. Have a great rest of your weekend.